All right, welcome everyone to the session. We are just getting started now. I am just going to take a few minutes. We will wait for a few more people to enter, and then we'll get started with Senator John Brooks. Your moderator for today is going to be Brian Biedenbender. Brian, do you want to say hello?
Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Biedenbender. I'm the Vice President of Sales here at Tech. I was fortunate, and I'm fortunate enough to know Senator Brooks, so we were able to put this together, and I hope it's of assistance. We'll wait for a few more people. We'll go over the kind of the rules of the session and just kind of how we're going to do this, and then we'll get started promptly.
And as many of you know, we actually have 4 days of this tech summit. So feel free to go to tech.com. If you go to our events page, you'll be able to see all the different sessions that we have that will be running throughout the next 4 days. Everything that you'll need to know to prepare you for this upcoming school year, to help address some of the weird issues that we're dealing with when it comes to hybrid learning, different strategies to get you feeling a little more prepared when things are so uncertain. So make sure to check out all those different sessions that we have available. You can still register for those sessions. You can register up until the minute the session starts. So feel free to check out that page, and we hope to see you at some of our other sessions.
Great. It looks like we have about 17 or 18, so why don't we start?
All right.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Biedenbender. I'm the Vice President of Sales here at Tech. I wanted to introduce our speaker today, Senator John Brooks. Senator John Brooks is the chairman of the Veterans Military Affairs and Homeland Security Committee, and he's also a member of the Education Committee in the New York State Senate. He represents New York's 8th Senate District since he was first elected in November of 2016. So today he's going to spend some time talking about what's going on at Albany and the things that they're attempting to do to help schools through this unprecedented challenge. And he'll also be able to take some questions. So we're going to start off with him sharing some information with us on what's going on. At the conclusion of his remarks, we'd like to offer everybody the opportunity to ask questions. Before you do ask a question, I'd like you to please identify yourself and the district that you represent. Senator Brooks represents a district here on Long Island, but certainly we welcome questions from throughout the state. So please make sure you identify your name and the district that you're from before you ask the questions. With that, we're very pleased to have Senator Brooks. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Brian, and good afternoon, everybody. I just kicked the cable, just made a quick twist there. It's a pleasure to be with you. I think these are very challenging and trying times right now, particularly in the area of education. We know that effectively schools have been closed since April in many of our districts. Districts are not sure what they're going to do with the reopening that's coming up for the new school year. We're in a situation where there are multiple opinions of what should be done, including just short of a demand from Washington that all schools reopen, and if not, you may not get any federal aid. I think I can't understand their thinking, number one. We've been in a situation since the schools closed that all of the school districts in this state have been trying to manage around this pandemic. A lot of efforts made to make use of distance learning, but we know that many districts are challenged in multiple ways. In some communities, the internet system itself is not what it needs to be. In some households, they might have one computer and 6 or 7 kids, and it makes it difficult for them to get online. One of the things I think we have to really think about, we can't do it this year, but perhaps next year we do a bond act to make sure that we bring the internet up to speed across the state, and we provide school districts with assistance so that they have the equipment they need to take a look at distance learning. We know, and these months we've seen some advantage to the fact that people can work from home more. I think if we're real smart, we'll never have another snow day in the school systems. We'll be able to use some distance learning as we go on. I just want to kind of give you a fast overview and give you an opportunity to bring up questions so that we can have a better discussion in the afternoon. By coincidence, the Educational Committee is going to be meeting today at 4 o'clock on some pending legislation. We're up here this week. We're going to probably be looking at something close to 200 bills over the next couple of days. A lot of uncertainty still from a financial standpoint is where we are as the state revenues are down. Some of these school districts are in a situation where taxes aren't being paid. I know in some districts there's transportation issues out there, not just how we're going to manage transportation given the social spacing, but in some cases some bus companies have ceased to exist, and that's going to create some challenges. Just real quickly, I think that we know there are going to be further cuts in funding. The state revenues are down. We're going to have to figure out how we manage around those. I know too, when you look at the classroom, and if you use the social distancing that we want to use, a classroom effectively becomes half the size. So how do we handle that? Are we going to have students on split sessions? If you are you going to try to change the class size, that's going to require additional teachers. So a lot of uncertainty. And one of the things we have to be mindful of here is New York State, by Constitution, we cannot go into debt. And that's why the funding that we're looking for from Washington is so important. If they don't provide us dollars, then we're in a situation we're going to have to make cuts. And that's a big concern to me, number one. All of you know across the state, we are tremendously dependent on the use of real residential property taxes to fund education. Many districts, more than 75% of the cost of education is being funded by residential property taxes. And many of the folks in the state of New York right now are struggling because they are not back at work. They've seen reductions in incomes. In some cases, the company they work for is not going to return after the pandemic. So I think we have to really, over time, take a good hard look at how we fund public education in this state, and to make sure that we're in a situation where it is truly reflective of one's financial ability. There's always been a lot of criticism on the use of real property taxes to fund education. The value of one's home is not necessarily reflective of your financial condition. You can have two individuals in homes of $500,000, just for a number. One, the house has been inherited and it's owned free and clear. The other has a $450,000 mortgage, just for a number, not in the same financial condition. Our seniors, their houses have great value. They've appreciated over the many years they own the home, but not reflective of the income. You can't go to the tax collector and say, "Here's the window from my bedroom. I don't have enough money right now, but I'll use a piece of the house to pay for it." It doesn't work that way. So with a lot for us to look at, and certainly we know our students themselves. I know I have two grandchildren. One of them was just in kindergarten, and she misses seeing her friends. That's a big issue. And I know as we go through the grades as they went up, these relationships have been important. They haven't been carried on. I know people are making a yeoman's effort to try to educate the kids at home, but for some people that's an extra challenge. And again, the internet services are not there. So what I'd like to do most is to open the floor up to you guys so we can discuss the things that you're concerned with. I won't pretend to have all the answers. I can give you what we're thinking about. Education is very much a top issue up here right now, and how we're going to deal with the funding request is stuff we're going to be talking about a little bit later today. So Brian, you want to open up? It's good.
Yes, thank you, Senator Brooks. Just a correction to what I said at the beginning, because this is a webinar, we won't have the live voice question. So if you have a question, please type it in the chat box and I'll read it out to Senator Brooks so he can answer. He can see it on his screen as well. But to make sure it was a nicely curated webinar and there wasn't a lot of background noise, you can't open up your microphone. So if everybody would take the moment to type a question into the box and to kick it off, Senator Brooks, one of the things we hear from, we deal with educational technology as a company. One of the things, so that's what we hear from districts about. And many of them are concerned about the ability to implement this technology effectively in the time period. So we have a lot of schools using the Bond Act that was passed previously in 2014. So is there anything particular that the Education Committee is doing to help many of these districts? Here on Long Island, most people have access to internet in the schools, but throughout the state, there are people that don't. So is there anything particular the State Education Committee is considering to help districts implement this technology in time for the beginning of school year?
I think we're going to be having a discussion. However, the budget is done. So there's no additional resources and the revenues are down. So some of those resources aren't available. I've reached out to the school districts in my district to get a wish list from them as to what they need. Significant demand for additional computers of one type or another. And in many communities, as I said before, there are some real problems in the internet capacity within the community. And certainly when you get further upstate in some of the regions, I know that some areas, their ability to get on the internet is exceptionally restricted. We're going to be talking about some longer range ideas, I think, later today. I have some proposals I want to bring up. But the fact of the matter is right now, we don't have a lot of money to help bail everybody out. And that's why we need to get the money from the federal government to try to do that. Longer range, I do believe, we can't do it in this coming election, but the next election, I think we're going to have to think very hard about the idea of having a bond act so that all of the school districts can be brought up to speed. And where there are programs that they can be provided to help them, they'll be made available. But like I say, right now, money is very, very tight without federal assistance.
Okay, the first question we have, Senator Brooks, is from Walter Deleuze. I believe he's from New York City. His question is, how deeply have school bus companies been affected by this, especially in New York City?
I can't speak for New York City directly, but I know here on Long Island, one of the bus companies has closed. They were not provided the revenue source that they were anticipating. For what now, 5 months, I guess, where we're at, and they've had to close, and they represented or provided service to a large number of companies. So I think a good number of them may not be able to return. The other thing that you have is people that were bus drivers may well have found other occupations to go to as they have to supplement their income, and we've got to see where that is. Critically, too, is how many people can you put on a bus now with distance learning? Are we going to have to double the number of buses we need in a district? We don't know. So I think it's going to be significant. I'm aware of one large company here on Long Island that has shut down.
Thank you, Senator. And as a reminder to everybody, please type your questions in the chat box. The next question, Senator, is from Dana Esposito from New Bergen Large City School District. Good afternoon, Senator. Being that the number of COVID-19 cases keeps changing, these conversations are purely theoretical, correct? It will all depend on if we are cleared to enter a school building. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have the virus itself seems to be changing right now. When we were bad at war with the virus here, there was an assumption that younger people were not being affected. We know that's not the case now. We're seeing 20-year-olds and the rest involved. As you know, there's an instance where a lot of infants, and one of them, in fact, passed away, that have been involved. Sometimes the virus seems to almost have a mind of its own. And is changing some different situations. So yeah, we have to be very careful whether we open the schools or not first. the virus now, which in some ways is almost running rampant across the country, many of those cases most affected right now are areas that residents from New York go to for vacation, Myrtle Beach in South Carolina, Florida, different areas. How many people are going to be coming back with the infection going forward? So whether we're going to reopen is a big question. Then there was always that belief that the virus itself would return as part of a cycle in the fall into the winter months. We have to see if that happens. You know, it's really is alarming to think that we went through what we did in April and the shortage of materials and the testing and the rest. And here we are basically moving into August with the very same problems in different areas. You wonder if we learned anything from what we went through. It really is inexcusable, some of the discussions we're having. We're having a debate whether or not you should wear a mask, and where some communities are demanding everybody wear a mask. The governors of those states are suing them not to do that. You know, I don't know where our head's at sometimes with this situation. So in terms of the schools, and we're just finishing an op-ed piece right now, but basically we have no greater responsibility than our children. If we're going to open schools, we have to do that knowing that they're going to be safe. We've got to really look at the challenges that we have, and unfortunately, we end up with a childcare problem at the same time. If we don't open the schools and both parents have returned to work, how do we handle that situation? So the school districts right now are making an evaluation. I think we're also going to have to make another evaluation and just where we are in general with regards to the virus, and whether we see things turn for the worst, if you will, in terms of it coming back. So there aren't final decisions here. I know I've talked to the superintendents in my district, and they have all different ideas, from staggered days, the students into not opening at all, to you know, other situations where they're going to look at distance learning and a split program. So we've just got to watch. But look, this virus is real. It's continuing. There's a lot of doctors that are suggesting that some of the people that have been sick may also have some organ damage we didn't initially were aware of, that we have to deal with. So I think there's more uncertainty here right now than there is certainty as to what we're doing come the return to school.
Thank you, Senator. While we're waiting for an additional question, you spoke several times during this chat about the need for additional assistance from Washington. For the people here from school districts, whether they be leaders of the school districts or not, what is something that they can do to kind of help that assistance? So is there a way to help the state make that voice louder? What are your recommendations to them to be most effective in getting this voice through to Washington?
Well, they need to talk to their Congress representatives and the state senators who are actively trying to get this money. You know, when you look at New York State, with the changes that were made in the tax laws, as most of you know, we have capped on the deductibility of state and local taxes, a cap of $10,000. The impact of that legislation was a $15 billion tax increase for the state of New York, $15 billion more. That's almost half the amount of money we provide to school districts in New York State for state aid to education. That's a tax increase that went to Washington. New York State, prior to the change in the tax law, sent about $48 billion more to the federal government than we got back in benefits. New York State is the leading donor state to the federal government in our country. So we have to drive home to our representatives in Washington that we paid more than our fair share. And when that money was distributed the first time, states not very heavily affected by the virus got more assistance than we did. So we have got to drive home to them. It is paramount that we get a fair share. And this discussion about if you don't open, you don't get any federal assistance from education cannot be allowed to stand. School districts have to make the right decision for those districts. If there's a significant outbreak, they have to do the right thing and close. So I think again, we pay and give Washington more than its fair share from New York. We need help, and we need it now.
Thank you, Senator. Just one last question, unless there's any additional that pop up in the box. NYSED has been releasing some guidelines for schools, and one of the things that we've heard, and NYSED is doing a lot of work, so I don't mean to criticize, is that those guidelines have been a little bit generic. Do you know if NYSED is intending on releasing more specific guidelines, or is there anything else around those discussions?
That I don't know. I haven't talked to NYSED with regards to specifically to their request. I've really concentrated more talking to my local districts. And some of them have real challenges. We have one school district, we just put a monitor in because of the financial problems within that district. We have districts again where their homes with 6 kids in the house and 1 computer in the household, or many of the districts had to give hotspots, I think is what the term was called, to let the kids go home so they have access. So we're going to have to recognize that how we return to school is very much going to be a regional situation, number one. And how do we address the situation where both parents have had to return to work? They have a number of younger children at home that can't be left alone. How are we going to manage through that situation? So, I appreciate that NYSED is making proposals, and I think they're right to be at that table. But I think at the end of the day, the decisions are going to be at the local level, regardless of what we want to try to do. If you're in a situation where there's an outbreak or you have other driving concerns, and certainly too, in many communities, the school districts are the primary provider for food for some of the kids at the same time. So I think everybody should put their suggestions in the hat, but I think we're going to have to recognize the final decision is going to be made at the local level.
And actually, we did get a couple more questions here. Do you have a few more minutes, Senator?
Sure.
One question we got was, are there any discussions you're aware of a change to the projected first day of school?
The school districts are all looking at various options. And what the governor's done is asked each school district to put together a plan for themselves. And I know, at least in the district I reside in, the school board sent questionnaires to all of the parents who have children with a series of options. What would you prefer in each case? And I think every school district can be looking at things different. It wouldn't surprise me to see some delayed openings. It wouldn't surprise me to see split sessions. It wouldn't surprise me for some schools to say, no, we're going to continue with the distance learning for right now. And I think whatever you decide, the districts, it's going to be tentative, subject to changes in the mental health conditions within the medical health conditions within the community. If that virus comes back, it's going to be tough. And again, if we saw by what we did with closing the schools, with keeping people home, with wearing the masks, we brought the rate of infection down. We're getting a little sloppy, and we're seeing some increases in areas, and I know the governor's quite concerned about that, and particularly now in the holiday season, 4th of July and other events, we're getting large gatherings without people taking the needed steps, and that's having an impact. You're seeing an increase in infections. So we have got to stop shooting ourselves in the foot in that way. We've got to understand this is very real. This disease is damning in terms of the impact, and what we see in the other states right now is showing that. So I think even if we reopen, you've got to understand there's going to be some flexibility based on what's happening. It wouldn't surprise me for many districts to elect to delay the opening for a period of time. Maybe some school districts are going to decide we're going to try to be open 3 days a week to try to. We just have to see what happens with that.
Okay, it looks like there's a couple questions here, all kind of centered around the same topic, and I think you've addressed it a little bit, but you think this will be a regional approach where every area as designated by the state will end up having their own policies based on the infection rate in the area. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the first round, if you will, of the disease was very much regional. The reopening has been done on a regional phase basis too, in terms of what's going on. So I think there's no reason not to think we're going to have to take the same regional approach with the reopening of schools. The virus has not gone away, clearly, and the impact from one community to the next is very different. We're going to have to deal with that.
And then these are not questions, just comments that looks like people wish to share with you that they think people with Masters of Educational Technology, whether they're in schools or not within the schools currently, are an underutilized resource to help all these districts. The funding for those individuals is also not as prevalent. One thing, and you know, that our company was involved with at the outset with the Smart Schools Bond Act from 2014 is something that we've seen throughout the state, you know, well before the governor was the governor or you were a senator, that capital projects don't include funding for training and professional development because of the finance rules. So you end up getting a lot of fancy gadgets without the requisite funding in place. And so that's something that we would say we hear from our customers, and we're hearing some in the chat here that would be a welcome change, I think, for many of these districts, because teachers need to learn how to get the proper training. They have to. You want efficacy from these things. You don't want them just to be paperweights. So that's something that I would say, well, honestly, that would be beneficial to the company that I work for. Would certainly be beneficial to the customers we have, which are all the school districts we have here in New York State.
And I think when I was saying that Bond Act, I think that's all inclusive of that. These systems are not plug and play, and what does and doesn't work on the internet for classes varies from grade level and everything else. So I do think within that scope would be a training program for the entire educational community and how to utilize this equipment. How does it prepare? How do we train or educate our parents on how to use that system? Because, you know, if a child is on the internet trying to do something with a class but doesn't understand, how does the parent work with the student as well? So, Brian, I agree with you 100%. I think we have to take a good hard look at, if you will, distance learning. What are all the requirements? That's technology, that's connectability to the system, that's age/grade appropriate use of the system. The educators themselves to have an understanding, the parents to have a general overview. I mean, if the child can't bring the system up, they may have to, you know, assist to get that thing done. So I think it's a broad-based picture. On the positive side, if we get that done right, we'll never ever have another snow day in the school systems. You can learn from home that day. If your child's not feeling quite well, maybe he or she can participate in a different way that day. So yeah, I think we really have to make sure that we all of the ingredients that will successfully make distance learning is taken into consideration, and that very much is educating people.
And it looks like we got one more, if you have time for one more, sir.
Sure.
Okay. Is there a website we can go to learn more about the Bond Act and what it could do for us?
The Bond Act is an idea right now. We're working on it up here. That's one of the things I have the staff working on right now. Bond Acts would go on election day. We're basically in July. There's no way we can do that this November. So that would be next November. I'm going to bring that up with some people at our education committee today. But there's nothing in writing yet. It's a conceptual discussion we're having at the moment.
Okay. Thank you. I don't see any additional questions in the Q&A, nor do I see them in the chat box. So I want to take this opportunity to say thank you, Senator Brooks. We appreciate the time with us today. I know that you have a busy schedule up in Albany, so we appreciate you taking the time with the 30 or so people that have joined us today. And thank you very much.
My pleasure. And to everybody, our kids, in the end, are the most important thing we have to worry about right now. That's not just their education, it's their safety. And as we look to reopen schools, we got to make sure we're doing that the safest way we can possibly do. And, you know, your responsibility as a parent, you know, for many of you, childcare is going to be a big issue, and we've got to find a way to address that. So I think all of us should put our heads together, make suggestions, and recognize at the end of the day, all of those suggestions may be greatly altered by the progress, if you will, of how we're dealing with this virus. If it's taking control, we need to get people home. If we're way ahead of the game, great, but let's make sure we maintain the disciplines, the masks, the social distancing, all of that we've done. You know, we're not as in control of the situation as we want to be. And our medical fields have been tested dramatically. Education is being tested. You as a parent are being tested. And for the kids, it's tough. They're not seeing their friends. It's important to them. Their socializing isn't there. But let's make sure they're safe first, and then we'll deal with the rest. So I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. And anybody has a good idea or a question, they're free to send it to my office, and we'll get back to you on it. So again, I thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Senator Brooks. Have a nice afternoon.
You too.